The BigAl Podcast with your host, Al Bishop, unfiltered and uncut.
Sweet, we got Mr. Scotty Mac from the yard back. He was with us, joined us with Dricus Du Plessis in the last show. He does Dricus Strength and Conditioning. Welcome back, bud, and thanks for joining us.
What's up, Al? Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Only a pleasure, man. I guess we got to see some of your work in a way with Dricus's last fight. Obviously, you're one of the many cogs in the machine behind the champ Dricus Du Plessis. Just give us your thoughts on how you thought his fight went.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I always tell Dricus, please let the fight go longer. I'm waiting for a 5-round war.
Sure.
You know, that really he can showcase or test his fitness, you know, in the octagon,
Yeah, sure.
You know, in front of the lights. But it was short and sweet. He at least showed off his strength that we've been working on.
Yeah.
You could, in my opinion, you could see straight away he was stronger than the guy. He did quite a significant cut, so he was bigger, probably outweighed the guy a bit. And yeah, he dealt with him clinically and quickly, so obviously happy.
Cool.
But yeah, waiting to see him go a bit longer.
Just staying with Dricus for a little bit, and then we'll get into some more exciting stuff. Obviously now, I'm not sure if the fight's 100%, but it seems like it's done and dusted. He's going to fight Yannick Bahati in August.
Yeah.
Now, obviously physically there's a bit of a discrepancy in their build, and I can't say strength. I don't know, like,
yeah,
it's hard to say, because I mean, like, for the common person who looks at that situation of those two guys standing next to each other, there's a difference in size, let me say.
Yes.
You know, like Bahati's more of like your, let me say, like a bodybuilder-esque type physique, whereas Dricus is a little bit more maybe athletic, if I can put it that way. So from your side as a strength and conditioning coach, what's the next step for Dricus? Do you try and pack on more weight, his walk-around weight, and then cut a little bit less, or what's exactly in your mind right now thinking about the next fight?
So, yeah, we've already chatted about it. We've briefly chatted about it. We're having a sit-down on Thursday, and I'm going to lay out the formal plan in terms of what we're going to do with his weight and his strength, and what we're going to do for this fight, because he is obviously not only moving up to middleweight, but he's moving up to fight a guy who's a big middleweight and does a big cut down to middleweight. So a guy could be fighting light heavy,
yeah,
and actually, you know, hold his own size-wise and strength-wise in light heavy. Yeah, he looks like a bodybuilder. He looks muscle-bound,
sure,
but Yannick is strong.
Yeah.
And I know this because I trained David Bursky. He fought him, and you know, I've gotten feedback from David. I've watched that fight, and to be honest, David was surprised at how strong Yannick was. You know, in the octagon. David's not a weak boy. You know, he puts in his strength work, and so our plan, going back to what your specific question was, is Dricus we are going to add on a little bit of lean mass. Dricus does do a big cut to welterweight. Some people may think it's a very big cut. He fought this last fight in the octagon the next day at 87 kgs.
Sure.
So it's not an extensive amount of weight that we need to put onto him. I want to put a little bit of weight onto him, but he might have to come back down to welterweight, and that's another kettle of fish altogether, having to drop muscle mass as opposed to weight from body fat. So Dricus, you know, he stays lean year round. So we're going to have to be smart about it. We'll decide exactly what weight we want to take him up to. Dricus is strong. We'll get him a bit stronger for this fight. But we're going to do this. He'll probably fight a bit lighter than Yannick, but, you know, he is more athletic. He's fitter. And, you know, we don't want to compromise that. His athleticism, the way he moves, the way he can get off the ground, the way he can, you know, manipulate the fight with his movement. So we'll keep him mobile. We'll keep his athleticism and get him to a weight that will, you know, suit this fight a bit more.
Yeah, sure. And that's, I was asked about it by Simon Stevens on the clinch, and he asked me about my opinion on the fight. And it's basically what I said, you know, Dricus, I'm going to edge Dricus for that fight. He's going to be a little bit quicker, you know. strength, I can't say it's a tough one because it's, you know, Dricus is extremely strong, and I think that's one of his biggest weapons is his strength, you know. But against a guy who's physically going to be a little bit bigger than him, it might be interesting. So what I said was, in that, where I see the big difference is if Dricus has to fight off of his back, dealing with the guy who's obviously quite strong and maybe outweighs him a little bit.
Yeah.
So how would you go about, like, picking out a weakness for strength-wise to say something like, okay, off your back, we need to try and implement a strength regime that's going to increase your ability to get off your back?
Well, yeah, the thing with Yannick is, you know, he is a strong guy, but he's very heavy when he's on top, you know.
Sure.
And Dricus does have this uncanny ability of getting, you know, when he is when a guy is on top of him in mount, he is good at squirming out of those positions, and he is strong at moving out of them. There are a few movements, strength-specific movements that we do year-round that help that and assist with that. We may work them more than we normally do. But he also just needs to get to the right weight for this fight and get comfortable training at CRT at that weight, working with Attila with his wrestling at that weight. So he's mobile at that new weight. So, you know, he matches Yannick. He doesn't feel outsized. But, yeah, it is a factor, but I don't think it's that big a factor because of Dricus's wrestling ability and his ability to get out of bad positions when he is on the ground. So.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, it's a hell of an interesting fight, and it's I think exactly like we've just said, there's a lot of questions and I think that's what makes great fights for me is answering questions. You know what I mean? If everyone's got a lot of questions, I think that's what makes it interesting. And I think for Dricus, it's a massive step in his career. I think for both guys, in fact, you know, a little bit more for Dricus if he wins that, he becomes a 2-division champion.
Yeah.
And I guess for all you guys behind the scenes, it's a big thing for you. It's a big achievement. It's not to say it's something that goes on your CV, but it's your work in essence is in front of people's eyes. You know, everyone can see your work. You know, which I suppose is a cool thing as well for everybody involved. I want to chat about the yard. It's that's your gym in the design quarter in Fourways.
It's across the road, by the Cycle Lab and Pro Shop, just on the same side of the road, across the road from Design Quarter.
Sure. And how long have you guys been training? It's been a long time.
5.5 years been open. Yeah.
Okay. And what is it exactly that you do there?
So we just train properly in simple terms. Yeah. So it's a no frills type gym. We don't have mirrors. We have the bare essentials in terms of equipment. We focus on the fundamental training methods that we believe have stood the test of time. So your barbell training, your kettlebell training, so free weights, body weight movements, and a big kettlebell component. And we just use simple old school methods, program them properly, and we make sure people get their technique right and progress with their training. And we do that in an environment that we've created that's, no frills, no fuss. It's about the training. It's not about the gun show and the mirrors and who's got the latest Nike tee. It's not, like the commercial gyms out there that, I don't know, I can't stand trying to train in them. I feel like I'm standing in my kitchen. We turned a basement into a training facility. We're a strength and conditioning gym that trains the still bulk general population people, and then we have a big powerlifting, weightlifting component. My colleague Joshua runs the York Weightlifting Club, and then we train athletes as well. So it's geared towards that, training athletes and then training general population. Actually, very similarly to how we train the athletes, because we're all humans with the same movement patterns, etc.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's that sort of gym environment is one that's like really on the increase, even still now. And that's one of the questions I want to ask you is we've seen this massive surge, like with MMA, for example, that's really started to like take off. And I think MMA has been quite a big tool to show people the other side of training. There's not just martial arts, there's a whole other side to it. And then we've got the CrossFit generation that's come through, and it seems now that almost like I don't know, I can't say exactly, but maybe CrossFit is evolving, or the mass amount of CrossFit gyms specific are shutting down and the best ones are surviving, and then kind of like the more old school way of training, like you've spoken about, like you do at the yard, no mirrors, and you know, nobody cares about what Nikes you're wearing, and it's like gritty, getting down to some real training. So where do you guys fit in? Like, is it more CrossFit, or it's just like a kind of gym where you guys have created an environment where it's serious training, and that's what you're all about?
Yeah, I've always like to say to people, because, you know, over the years people have come through our doors and they're like, wow, we've never seen a gym like this in South Africa. Like, how did you come up with this idea? And I'm like, you know, proper strength and conditioning facilities have existed in the States and all over the world for many, many years, you know. And I used to be a Virgin Active trainer. I worked there for over 5 years. And while studying my sports science honors, I realized, you know, there isn't anywhere around where I have everything at my means to train people the way I want to. And the kind of environment to hone in on that type of training. So I don't think we did anything special or new. Yeah, we have our own character. The gym's full of graffiti. We have our own style of doing things. You know, we like to think we blend science and attitude. But it's just proper strength and conditioning training. So, you know, how we would differ to CrossFit is one version of strength and conditioning. It's their take on strength and conditioning. It's obviously CrossFit comes under a lot of critique, and it's an interesting beast. It's done, I'd say CrossFit's done more good than bad, you know, to the fitness industry. It's opened up the confidence for guys to open up CrossFit boxes and these alternative style gyms in South Africa. And, you know, guys have done it well, guys have done it wrong, guys have done it for money, guys have done it for passion. So it's a very interesting thing to talk about. But, you know, our gym, we program things differently. We don't use certain movements that we don't believe in, like the kipping and that CrossFit uses. And we definitely don't turn every workout into a competition, WOD style. And that being said, there are guys who tweak CrossFit programming, who own CrossFit boxes and are very successful, who don't follow, you know, traditional CrossFit style training. And it's just like the best CrossFit athletes have more programmed traditional periodized style training. You know, it's got a high level of variability in the movements they do, but it relies on strength and conditioning principles that have been around for a long time. So yeah, CrossFit has evolved. You get guys now closing down their CrossFit gyms and because of the affiliation fee, and just doing their own take, keeping a similar name, and now they're just a strength and conditioning gym that uses more CrossFit movements than, say, we would at the yard, or buys in more into the high intensity hype and still does that. Or you get guys who've stuck with the CrossFit name and do their take of CrossFit, because there is no, you know, no one really is just following the CrossFit.com programming and running their box off that. They're doing their take, and they're taking workouts from here and there, and yeah, so it's very interesting. But it's awesome to see how CrossFit opened up the market for guys to have the confidence to open gyms, and it's filtered into sports like powerlifting, weightlifting, and just like guys who now realize there's places to train besides Virgin and Planet Fitness and the big box gyms. You know, there's opportunities out there to go and train with, you know, high intensity or with traditional barbells, kettlebells, body weight, and throw it down a bit. And then there's opportunities to train at gyms that have their own take of it, and they can shop around now. And when we were opening, there wasn't too much around. There were a few CrossFit gyms, and yeah, it's cool to see how it's evolved. The South African market, there's choice for the consumer, which is cool.
Sure. And there's I think globally we've seen this mass movement in fitness and nutrition, and I think people are becoming more aware that it needs to become an integral part of your life to you know, to exercise, to eat well, to do things properly, and that like you say, there's more alternatives than for some person to arrive at Planet Fitness and look around and go like, well, where the fuck do I start? What am I doing here? You know, and those traditional gyms can become, I suppose gyms in general can be quite intimidating, especially for people that don't know what they're doing, but they don't have to be thrown onto one of 65,000 treadmills with, you know, the latest shoes and fancy equipment. You can just go to a gym and train, you know, and train differently and properly. And one of the funnier things maybe I'm mistaken, but it also seems to me that it's like, I think people might look at a gym like yours or some of the other bigger gyms and think, well, I can't afford that. You know what I mean? But 9 times out of 10, those types of gyms are probably cheaper than your Virgin Active or whatever it may be, and you might be getting a bit more value for money. So what I want to ask you then is, what do you think is really driving this whole movement to, like we spoke just briefly off air about powerlifting is a big one, and it seems to be popping up all over the show again. Like, people are really getting into powerlifting and competitive powerlifting. Your style of gym, strength and conditioning, and what do you think is really driving that? Do you think it's like it's just kind of like a phase humanity's going through, or there's like a big push behind it?
I think a big thing has to do with social media, just the internet in general, and how, if you go back before we opened the yard and think of it then, in strength and conditioning, like, you had to know who to look for. You would actively search for it. Now it's a lot more in your face.
Sure.
You exposed to it more through CrossFit's one of the reasons why. It's exposed people to heavy barbell lifting, heavy weightlifting, heavy powerlifting, but also as these gyms have popped up and people start doing these sports, and there's, people they gravitate towards, say, powerlifting themselves, then their friends hear about it. I mean, the one thing people always say is, how do you know someone does CrossFit? They'll tell you. Yeah. So we've all been to that brow where the mates, I do CrossFit here, this, that. But so as guys started opening the gyms where there were less private, small old school style gyms, as they started opening, it's just spread. If we're talking very specifically in the South African market, and then your Facebooks and Instagrams, once you start getting intrigued by it, you realize there's this whole world out there.
Sure.
So I mean, if it's something you're going to gravitate towards, it is almost like a subculture. Lifting, just like bodybuilding has its place, and guys at Virgin who still can train there for their bodybuilding purposes, it's a subculture as well. And it's just nice to see how the strength sports subculture has grown in the country. And it's mostly due to the fact that it is just available now, and guys have the confidence to open the gyms now, and as word of mouth has spread, more people have wanted to do it. Yeah. And again, as much as over the years I've had my say about CrossFit, like, CrossFit's had a big part to do with that as well. And like, kudos to the system and for them to put out functional training out there. So it did a lot. And, and the South African market, there was a stage a few years ago where people would walk through our door, is this CrossFit? We want to do CrossFit. And now it seems like everyone sort of matured away from that, and they don't have to do CrossFit. They want to do alternative training to the Virgin and that, and they want to do proper strength and conditioning, and they want proper coaching. And they may find the proper coaching within a CrossFit box, or they may find it at a strength and conditioning gym that's not under the CrossFit banner. So it's just sick to see how things have changed. Like, whereas back in the day, trying to buy a pair of kettlebells was next to impossible, or trying to buy Olympic weightlifting shoes, you'd have to import them yourselves or buy them when you're overseas. Now you can buy them at a Reebok store in Mall of Africa or wherever it is. So it's just very cool to see how it's all evolved.
Yeah, sure. And just like on strength and conditioning specifically, where do you think your everyday person goes wrong with that sort of training? Let's say in the Virgin Active environment, a guy thinks he wants to get a bit stronger, maybe he does a pile of squats and a pile of like strength exercises. Where do you think many people get that sort of stuff wrong?
If you're talking about specifically like a commercial gym setting, is it's probably not valuing a coach's input who's got knowledge and getting taught to do the movements properly and execute them properly. Because if you just did a month of training with a coach and got your squat down properly, if you had mobility issues, fix those, that kind of things, and you got the basic movements down, you'd get so much more out of them. And, there are a lot of great programs out there. A lot of guys program hop. If they just got their movements correct, the classic movements, and then stuck to programs that have been proven to work properly, they would get better results. The problem is guys, they buy into this illusion of progress. So they hop around from program to program every 2 to 3 weeks. And you're going to get, if you're putting a new movement in, let's say it's bench press, and you haven't done it in your last program, you're going to get stiff, and then you're going to get stronger over a couple of weeks, and then you sort of plateau, and then you just jump to the next thing. But next time you go back to bench press, you're back to where you were. So, you know, guys program hop. So just being consistent, giving programs a time and programs and a style of training to work long enough, and not wanting to entertain yourself in the gym. I always say they're guys who they're there for entertainment or entertainment, and where they should be there to exercise, practice a skill, and progress over time and stick with it. So, yeah, I think guys go wrong because they think they know how to do things and they've gotten too much of an ego to get coaching.
Sure.
Or they're not putting in the effort to seek out the coaching, look for good coaches, actually look at the guy's resume, that kind of thing. Just going to the first coach and not doing their homework, because the information's out there. You know, there's articles on how to choose a good coach out there. There's many.
Yeah, but so you say that like it's one of those weird things, because there's so much crap to sift through. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like every day, if you're looking for it, whether it's nutrition, whether it's training, you'll get somebody's theory, and then the next person will debunk, and then that oaks bro science, and then that oaks science. You don't know what the fuck's really going on. So
It's
it can
crazy.
be like it's overwhelming. You know what I mean? Like I'm someone who follows nutrition quite hectically. Like, you know, to see like science-based evidence on new stuff, because like, let's take Tim Noakes, for example, and everyone was calling him out. Look, I'm not saying that I agree with Tim Noakes, but I'm saying the fact that he's changed his mindset means that he's carried on studying and he's evolved. You know what I mean? And he said, look, this is what I believed at the time. This is what the science said. But the new evidence says this. And so that's the way I think it should be all the time, in training and through nutrition and everything in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's always going to be new science or new evidence to bring through.
Yeah,
new
you're
theories.
100% right. And I mean, as a coach as well, if your program looks the same as it did 10 years ago, you're not evolving and learning and stuff. You know, science does get debunked. You know, they prove how studies were wrong and made errors. So, yeah, it does evolve. You know, I also like to say it's the trick nowadays is actually sifting through all the information, because we're in the information overload age.
Yeah.
And training and nutrition exemplifies this like crazy. So, you know, personally, I stick to guys I know and guys they recommend in the industry who've been around, who've proven success. And, you know, different forms of training work in different ways. There's not one way to skin a cat. There are principles when it comes to conditioning, strength, that kind of stuff that are set and hard and fast and have been proven. But, you know, you may get lean doing a Tim Noakes diet for one reason, and then you may get lean doing carb cycling.
Sure.
You know, still keeping carbs in your. So when it comes to nutrition, it's very individual. It's figuring out what works best for you, and that's a personal thing, and that's testing different nutritional approaches. And training you should gravitate to training that suits your style and what you want to achieve. And if you want to look like a bodybuilder, you're not going to train like a powerlifter. You know.
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah, I remember playing rugby. We had a coach that always said that. He's like, well, you guys must decide now if you want to look good on the beach in December, take the door on the right. If you want to play rugby, take the door on the left. You can't have both. You know what I mean? Like you say you can't, but most of the time you can't train to have a physique and train to be a sportsman as well. It's two very, very different things.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to say that a physique of a bodybuilder, because athletes have amazing physiques if they're keeping their nutrition clean, you know, or on point. So, I mean, I don't know. I think an athletic, like a fighter's physique or powerlifters have very interesting physiques. But if they clean with their nutrition, you know, I don't know. That's just what we prefer. We're not into the bodybuilding look at our gym. Much respect to those guys, different beast altogether. But yeah, you can train athletically as long as you've got the nutrition to match it. You could look as what I'd predict most people think is awesome.
Yeah, sure. Sure. What I want to also, one of the big things coming through lately with training specifically, and I think especially, again, like I refer back to MMA quite a bit, because I think a lot of people that watch MMA learn a lot of things from that. And one of the big things lately is recovery, and how the whole, recovery industry is really starting to take off. You know, with things like hyperbaric chambers and all sorts of like flotation chambers and all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and, you know, like ice baths and all sorts of weird things like that. So do you push that through a lot to your sort of clients? You're like, look, you know, don't neglect your recovery, or is there any specific kind of recovery that you recommend?
Well, like a way to put it probably is that training is stress. So whatever form of training you're doing, it is a stress to your system. If you recover from that stress, you will adapt, be better, and you would have gained the results you needed from your training. But if you're not recovering from that stress, you're not progressing. So it's actually it's a negative thing for you. So now you look at sleep. Lack of sleep is also a stress. Your body doesn't see it much different to a hard training session. Okay, bad nutrition, getting your body slightly inflamed from poor nutrition, poor eating habits. That's another stress. So when you put all your stresses together, if you can't recover from them, you're not going to progress. You're not going to get better. And if you look at our modern lifestyles and you look how, especially like sitting here in Joburg's city of gold.
Sure.
Most people are if they're in Joburg, they here chasing paper. They're in the rat race, and they've got this pressure on them daily from work. Then you take these guys who've got this pressure on them daily from work and they want to do a triathlon. And the typical mindset is more is better. So they're up, 4:30 to get in the gym or on the road to train. They're in traffic for an hour, driving to work in freaking exhaust fumes. Then they're sitting, stressing, trying to make deadlines at work. And then they think, oh no, I need to go back to gym in the afternoon, because I need to train more. More is better, hard is better.
Sure.
And with most people out there, especially in the environment we are here in a city like Joburg, they need to do less because they need to recover. And if, like we said, if you're not recovering, you're not progressing. So recovery, it is a massive industry now. There's many different recovery methods. Some are shit, and they're just a load of hype.
Yeah.
There's some traditional methods like sauna that are totally underutilized. But I think as you train, the more years you train, the more you understand your body. A form of recovery, you could look at it like this, is actually maybe doing one less session a week.
Sure.
And turning that into an active recovery session. So it's learning, and the athletes and the guys who've been training longer get more in tune with their bodies and they're able to manage this better. But there are, we chatted briefly last time with Dricus, there are external objective ways to measure your recovery. I'd highly recommend, if this is interests anyone listening, to get an HRV product. A preferred one that's very stable and works well is HRV, Bioforce HRV. And that will actually help you gauge where you're at in terms of recovery.
Okay, and what is that exactly?
So HRV technology is heart rate variability. So your heart rate variability, what it does is you would measure your heart rate over a set period of time. It's normally done in the morning. And you'd use a specific device to do it. The Bioforce one, you'd strap on a heart rate monitor that's Bluetooth, and then it links to an app on your phone, the Bioforce app. It measures the timing between your heartbeats.
Okay.
So at a specific point of your heartbeat, the timing and the variability, so the change. So say it's 0.002 seconds, 0.002 seconds between beats, but that keeps on changing between each heartbeat over, say, the 2-minute 30 that you do the reading. That variability in your heart rate gives you an indication of what's going on with your nervous systems, your sympathetic and asympathetic nervous system. And it over time, as you've taken a few readings, it will give you an indication of how recovered you are, where you're at. And it's also a good measure of fitness. So it was actually developed by the Russians for astronauts back in the day as a means of, checking on their astronauts as they're up there. And it's developed, there's quite a few products on the market now, that are very good products. That your top sports teams are using them now. But yeah, Bioforce HRV is an affordable one. Yeah, Dricus uses that. We check it every morning. I've got a platform where I can check all the athletes who are using it, and it's objective. So now, you can wake up and say, I think I'm feeling flat, and you've already done your HRV reading, and this collaborates with that. I need to back off a bit. I need to manipulate my training volume. And yeah, going back to the whole recovery equation, using recovery methods only are meaningful if you know how much you need to recover.
Sure.
So yeah, that can help you gauge how much training volume to do in a week, how intense your intensity should look. Yeah, so there are tools out there to measure your recovery now, which is awesome. And yeah, like the guys have done it for years in sports science. Simply monitoring your weight daily and your resting heart rate daily gives you an indication of your recovery. Guys would do like a neural test with a gripper where you'd grip a grip thing, and if your grip strength changed on a daily basis, then neurally it would show you that you're a bit flatter that day. So yeah, I mean, recovery is so key for athletes. If you're not recovering properly, you're not progressing. It's as important as your training. And you know, in this discussion, the biggest thing is a lot of the time people realize less is more.
Sure.
And there is a school of thought that you should use the minimal dose possible to elicit an adaptation, or to develop your strength and conditioning. Because, you know, if you go flat out and try overload yourself as much as possible to adapt and get better, yes, you'll see adaptation and progress for a few weeks, but it's short-lived. Whereas if you go for that minimal dose, you don't, it's not short-lived. You see it month after month after month, year after year. So you're almost coercing your system into getting better. And that hardcore approach that everyone follows, high intensity is the way, it's not the right way long term. And I mean, going back to your other question about what is the biggest mistake guys make, also in the back of my head, I was thinking about it. It's guys buy into this, I have to smash it, more is better. And it's a backward ass approach, because they develop the wrong energy systems in the wrong way.
Sure, it's. I mean, I find myself doing it as well. Like it's one of those things. Like last week, you know, like I'll try get like 4 JIT sessions in. I'll try get at least an hour in the boxing gym in, and then try, you know, then still do a strength and conditioning day, and then try and squeeze something else in. And like eventually you're running out of days, and you're like, you know, where's the rest gonna come?
Yeah.
And like last week, it got to Friday, and my body was like, no more.
and in your head, you're probably like, this is what I need to do.
Yeah,
the more is
like
better.
that, sure.
But maybe you need to build up to being able to do that and develop the biological power to actually handle that, so that you can recover from it and get the adaptations.
No, sure. And
so that's why plateaus happen all the time. So a lot of guys are just in a plateau state year round.
No, 100%. And I think it's very easy for people to fall into that trap. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you know, like I'm training, I can't skip a day. I can't take a day off. I've got to keep going, you know?
It's a massive fault with the MMA guys.
Sure.
MMA guys buy into that big time. And that's, you know, back to the CrossFit thing, that's where, you know, that WOD style training, it has screwed over a lot of people, where they think like every time you need to race a WOD, you need to, you know, the top CrossFitters they're mixing different types of intensity. They're doing easier days, they're doing easier workouts, they're doing full on hard workouts. So it's about planning your training properly, so that you can progress, so that you can recover. And I mean, it's also, when you're doing that high intensity training and your gauge of what good training is I'm totally out of breath, I feel like I want to coach, you know.
Sure.
And that's a good training session, you know. And that's, you know, that's how a lot of shitty trainers pull the wool over guys' eyes. They don't actually understand conditioning properly, so that all they do is beat guys up with hard training, and the guys, oh, high five, great workout, because I feel like coaching. So it's like, and I always say to guys, I can get any of the 15 guys I played club rugby with the last season I played, and they could do that to you. They'll make you do burpees, sprints, whatever. That doesn't make you a trainer. And a lot of fake-ass trainers out there, that's how they hide their lack of knowledge, is they just stuff you up in the gym.
Crap out of you.
And yeah, I mean, the thing is, high-intensity training has its place when you're working at that intensity and using your anaerobic training, you know, your anaerobic energy system. But, you know, and in fighting, guys think, I need to train my anaerobic system. I need to do high-intensity intervals. I need to do these, like, CrossFit-style circuits. I need to, you know, I need to go harder. I need to feel like I'm going to puke. That's what most guys buy into, and they think is proper conditioning. But, you know, the truth be told, your anaerobic system has very little leeway to develop. It only takes 4 to 6 weeks if you're conditioned aerobically to now peak your anaerobic system. And it's mostly genetically related, how anaerobically fit you are. Whereas your aerobic system, and developing your aerobic system takes working at low intensities, has massive opportunity to be improved. And this is one thing I did with Dricus, is cut back his training, really get his aerobic fitness. We were talking about last time, you know, you get him really aerobically fit. His resting heart rate's below 40. And then when you can create more energy and produce more energy aerobically, you don't have to tap into your anaerobic system, that high intensity system, as much, and that's when you truly are fit and a beast. So yeah, guys, the whole high intensity thing is it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there in terms of conditioning. When guys think of conditioning, they think of all-out intervals, that kind of stuff. They think that's what makes you fit, but it's developing your aerobic system and giving your body the ability to use your aerobic system, and it's so highly developed that you could produce high levels of power aerobically. Then you're fitter than other guys, because your aerobic system, I mean, now we're going deeper and deeper, but your anaerobic system, is when you produce energy without the use of oxygen, and it's short-lived. You can only sustain your anaerobic energy production for up to about 90 seconds. Okay? So an MMA fight, 3 5-minute rounds, is an aerobic dominant sport.
Sure.
Your aerobic system works from the minute you start. Okay, when you get to a certain your anaerobic threshold, so a certain heart rate. When your heart rate gets to a certain height, you're going to start using your anaerobic system. But if you're more aerobically developed, that heart rate where you start using your anaerobic system is much higher. Okay, so you've pushed that anaerobic threshold up higher. Plus, your aerobic system, the more developed it is, allows your anaerobic system to recover. So let's say now a fighter's in the cage, and they're standing, it's pretty easy back and forth, they're not really engaging, then they clinch, and now their heart rate's starting to shoot up, and their heart rate's getting closer to like 170, 175, and now they're becoming anaerobic. Then they move, let's say the fight changes to a position where they're in a bit of recovery. To recover their anaerobic system that worked for that 30 seconds or whatever they did when they went full out, the aerobic system helps it clear the byproducts of the anaerobic system and actually recover. So the more aerobically fit they are, the quicker the anaerobic system recovers and the quicker they can use it again. So that, paired with the fact that if you're aerobically developed, you can produce high power aerobically, not even going anaerobic. And when you go anaerobic, you can recover quicker from your anaerobic bouts. The aerobic system becomes key to the sport, and it's a big gripe I have. And I saw top gyms using CrossFit back in the day, and that's also why I wanted to get into MMA conditioning, because they're training a system that has very little leeway to improve. You get a lot of anaerobic training in your sparring sessions and in your MMA training already. And then there's been this big shift away from like road work and easy style aerobic training where you can develop your heart and your aerobic system. And that's actually the key. Get very strong, strength training, develop your aerobic system, because that's the base of everything, and you're a totally different beast. So yeah, that's a massive mistake guys make. And it's also, for health reasons, it's a massive issue in the gyms where guys think now the only way to train is these 20-minute high-intensity sessions.
Sure.
Because it does work well for fat loss. But for long-term health, you're never actually going to get that much fitter because you haven't given your aerobic system time to improve.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, being transparent and honest, back in the day, I bought into the high-intensity thing for a while, and I thought that's the way to go. And even though I'd learned better in sports science, but there's been such a push towards that, and luckily I started reading good guys and learning the right stuff and basing it on proper science.
Yeah, I think a lot of that stems from the financial side of the industry though as well, because I mean if you seeing clients in a day and from 4 to 7 is peak in the afternoon, that's when everyone can come. Okay, so you got 5, 6, 7, you got maybe 3, 4 people you can see.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, where you're pushing half an hour sessions, you're doubling your money.
Yeah.
And I think that, look, I can't say I don't know enough on the topic to say, but I think like for obviously most of the time, if somebody's seeing a personal trainer, fat loss is their main objective.
Yeah.
So a high intensity training suits them. So that kind of
100%.
like, I suppose it's also it's one of those things. I've got a friend who's very knowledgeable in the industry as well. And then he breaks it down quite simply, like for nutrition, for example. He's like, when was the last time you saw an ad for a cucumber? When did the TV pop up and say, eat more cucumbers? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, you know what I mean? So using that as a kind of base, like something that gets pumped and advertised and marketed is probably most of the time shit. You know what I mean? Not to say everything, but most of the time it probably is. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you see ads, go to this organic market and get some fresh food tomorrow instead of 4 for 100 rand dinner at Woolworths? You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. So
no, I mean, and America drives the worldwide fitness industry, and they, like their programs like P90X and all these high intensity programs, they've been the mainstay of what's commercially driven, and guys buy into it. They think that's what's necessary. Like, I mean, it's the high intensity train's been going for long now. I mean, CrossFit WODs, that's what it's high intensity varied fitness, and it's long term. It's not going to get you very far.
100%. Just with the MMA fighters, you also manage Dricus's weight cut.
Yes,
that's correct. So we've had Rory Diesel on before to explain his system and what he does and how it works. Obviously, in MMA, weight cutting must be probably the most controversial part of the whole thing. There's talk. I think it was a Californian Athletic Commission are now starting to implement stricter rules, more weight classes, and that eventually it has to feed through. But for the time being, it's a massive part of MMA. So maybe if you could just explain in brief to someone who doesn't understand exactly how it works, what you're doing when we're weight cutting. Obviously, like the way I said is two parts. There's the dieting part. So you diet down to a certain weight, for example, and then you start the water cut. And I think the water cut is a big one that people don't really get. They don't understand exactly what's happening.
Yeah, people are shocked when you explain the numbers around a water cut. So I mean, I think how MMA, the weigh-in rules and that, how it was established. I know in boxing they used to do a weigh-in the same day as the boxing fight, I think a few hours before, and then fight after a few hours later. And boxers, invariably you're going to have guys who are still a bit overweight the day of the fight, and then they would dehydrate themselves to get on weight, but then have to fight a couple hours later. So it was very dangerous. I mean, when you're dehydrated and there's less fluid on your brain, there's implications of getting punched in the head. Very dangerous. So what they did was they moved it to the day before. But all that happened with that rule change was that guys saw it as an opportunity of, we're weighing in the day before, we can dehydrate ourselves even more, get our weight down to the weigh-in that we have to be in, and then we've got a full day to rehydrate ourselves and fight at. And that's kind of where it's been at with fight sports for a long time. I know, like, one federation is that they sort of changed their weigh-in rules, and there needs to be change because it is dangerous. There are some stupid practices still going on. Guys doing old school style cuts where they dehydrated for like a week long almost, and then they go to fight the next day, and it's like they fought this week-long battle. How do they even think of fighting the next day? So obviously guys want to weigh in the day before and then be much heavier the next day to get a weight advantage. So you have guys, if you had to weigh them in the cage, like we said, Dricus weighed about 87 at a welterweight fight. He's 10 kgs heavier than welterweight. Yeah. So he fought 10 kgs heavier. He wouldn't have made middleweight if they weighed him in the cage. He would have been too heavy for middleweight. So obviously that gives him a size advantage, and there are weight divisions for a reason. There's a reason why bigger guys beat lighter guys. Obvious reasons. Okay. So, the fighters, like, it is still part and parcel of fighting because of the current laws, and you kind of, like, if you're not doing a big weight cut now, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. There are guys confident enough in their ability that they don't do massive cuts, but the best fighters, Conor McGregor does big cuts. The best fighters in the world do big cuts. It's part and parcel of the sport because of the current rule setup. So, I mean, how a weight cut works is basically, you talked about dieting down. The amateurism around the sport that still exists means a lot of their camp is actually, a big component about it is dieting down to get as close enough to their weight or the right amount of weight out so they can do a water cut, make weight, and then have that weight advantage. it's silly because when you're dieting down during a camp, you're obviously cutting your calories.
Yeah.
When you're cutting your calories, how are you fueling your training in the most essential part of your block of your year? I mean, each camp is when you want to really hone in your skills, really fine-tune your conditioning. Now you're cutting your calories and you're depriving your body and it can't recover during a camp. It makes absolutely no sense. So that's where the guys who are more professional, who stay closer to their weight year-round, have a massive advantage because they're actually able to eat carbohydrates, they're able to eat proper food in proper amounts during their camps and recover from their most high-volume, intense periods of training.
Sure.
So that's one component. So dieting down during camps, inevitably all fighters will have to cut a bit of body fat down to get closer to their weight category. But in essence, most guys should stay around where they want to weigh the next day during the fight, as close to that year round as possible, so that their camp isn't about a diet. It's about training and the skill, fine-tuning everything just for the fight. And they should rely just on the water cut to get on weight, to get that weight advantage. So how that works is basically you manipulating water. So you'd start, the way I do it, I'll just explain my way. There's slight variances in it, but this is pretty much how top nutritionists are doing it with top fighters. Is you do a water loading period, and I use 3 days. Where, say, a guy like Dricus, we'll use him as an example, drinks 4 liters on average a day of water. We'll bump up his water to around 8, 9, and 10 liters. Okay, I increment it every day and increase his sodium. Okay, so what you're doing when you're loading your water is you're down-regulating a hormone called aldosterone. And aldosterone, it governs and helps control your hydration. It makes you hold on to more sodium and it makes you hold on to water. When you down-regulate it, your body starts flushing water. So basically, you're tricking your body into expelling water through peeing a lot.
Sure.
Okay.
Just on that's one of the points I've always wanted. How do you sleep?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can wake up during the night and take a pee and go straight back to bed. So
Yeah, sure.
but by the night, you're constantly getting rid of that water during the day, and you may wake up 2 or 3 times in the night compared to one.
Sure.
It depends. So you also you'll breathe off more water in your sleep. It's amazing how much, if you weigh yourself in the evening and then again in the morning, you'd be surprised how much water you breathe off in the night. It's very interesting, and that's actually a number you need to get to know with your fighters, so you can closer to the weigh-in time, you know how much he'll lose over that night.
Sure.
So you'd load your water for three days. Some guys may push it to 4 days, and in that period, you've down-regulated aldosterone, the hormone that's governing your hydration, and you've tricked your body into flushing water. So it's expelling water. It's getting. If there's water in your system, it wants to get rid of it because you're flooding it and it doesn't want to be so full of water.
Sure.
Also, you're going to start most of the time you lower your carbohydrates, because for every gram of carbohydrates you eat, you're roughly taking in around about 4 grams of water. So, just being full of carbohydrates, so your liver glycogen and carbohydrate levels and your muscular carbohydrate levels are, you can already lose 2 to 4 kgs depending on your size just by cutting your carbs for a few days, because your carbs go out and the water that would have been with those carbs is stored in your body is out. So you can already drop. So say now, your normal weight walk around weight is 87. Just cutting your carbs, you could go down to about 84, 83 and a half, depending on how much muscle you have. Because the more muscle you have, the more carbohydrates you can store and how good your carbohydrate storage abilities are. So cutting your carbs brings down your weight quite a bit. Let's say 3 kgs. Now for 3 days, you've flooded your body and you've taught it to expel water. Then you suddenly, day 4, cut that water loading in half to about 3 liters. But your body's still in flushing mode. So it keeps flushing water because your aldosterone's down-regulated. So you'll suddenly drop a lot of another kg or 2 of weight just from cutting in half. And then if you go to your 5th day, this is the day before weigh-in, you would restrict your water right down to like a liter of water, round about there, and take in less food, because obviously the food quantity in your system weighs something.
Sure.
Then you can use natural diuretics. Caffeine is a natural diuretic. Dandelion root extract. There's various foods that are diuretics. So you can eat specific meals that also help you flush water. So you're taking in natural diuretics that are telling your body to pee out the water. You've cut your carbohydrates. You've cut your creatine. You've cut your sodium now over the last few days, which also causes water retention. And you're still in flushing mode. So now you've flushed out all the water possible in your system. That will get you to, say, now the Thursday afternoon before weigh-in, to being pretty light. You've already lost 3 kgs from the carbohydrates, and let's say now another 3 kgs from this flushing process and manipulating the micronutrients, and the minerals that affect water retention. So now you're 6 kgs down. Then from there, you do what guys used to do traditionally, like a week out, and you use sweating techniques. We like to use hot baths, full immersion, to sweat out the last bit of weight to make weight. Okay. So with my guys, we'll if necessary do a bath the night before the weigh-in, but we try leave it till the morning of weigh-in, because once you start going to the baths, you are dehydrating yourselves quite significantly. Okay. And you want to be at that level of dehydration for as short as possible. So now, if we can do it in the morning of weigh-in, you're only really going to be drastically dehydrated for a few hours. So we'll do most of the baths, and you can sweat out like up to 1 kg per bath. We'll use a technique where we in a hot bath, you're fully submerged, so the humidity level is 100% when you're fully submerged. That's why it works better than saunas. And you expel a lot of water. Do about a 20-minute bath that you can as hot as you can tolerate. You get a nasty sweat on, and then you get under blankets in sauna suits, that kind of thing, and keep on sweating for 40 minutes and keep on cycling that, and you'll drop the rest of the weight you need to. So I mean, another 3 to 4 kgs if you're doing a big cut as a heavier fighter. Then from there, you go to your weigh-in, you make your weigh-in, and then the hydration side of things start, and that's another
kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah, it involves some specific hydration mixes, specific meals and supplements that help you rehydrate your system fully. And that goes on, actually, if you're smart, it goes on till the fight the next night, because you've still geared your body into flushing mode. So now for that next day of weigh-in, your body's still kind of flushing. You've had some natural diuretics in your system. It's still going to expel more water than it needs to. So you kind of almost need to overhydrate. Okay. The guys used to use drips. Drips have been banned because you can get it, bypass the stomach and hydrate yourself very quickly like that. I've found with the right liquid mixes, you can get the same results as a drip anyway. And sometimes the drips are like almost too quick. But yeah, that's like in layman terms what you're doing. There's a few tweaks that you have to make. There's a couple other supplements you need to take along the way that I haven't gone into great detail about. But it is dangerous. It is like I've done some big cuts with guys where they were a bit further out than I would have liked them to be. Sure. But they were already as lean as they could be. So they've already signed the contract. They're going to fight a fight, and they need to make weight. And it's seen as unprofessional if they don't make it. So yeah, I've done cuts where I've had my mates or paramedics there with me. Sure. Just to in case something goes wrong. I've had guys doing cuts and they've passed out during cuts. Like briefly. So it's interesting, and it's. I said when we were on with Dricus, I don't necessarily agree with it, but it is part of the sport until they change the rules. Yeah. And the big rule change is that the one big thing is they're going to reweigh guys just before the fight and make sure they haven't gained more than 10% of body weight. And that will stop them, doing these big cuts. Yeah, sure. And it's, I think in South Africa, it's quite crazy because not everybody has access to somebody like yourself. You know what I mean? Some of these guys are just going based on what, maybe their coach is a former fighter, and based on what he did back in the day, they're doing the same thing. Yeah, like old school wrestling cuts and that kind of stuff you hear about all the time. And there was there was a fighter
they made a video. He was having issues with his weight cut. He had missed weight, I think, 2 or 3 times. And in this specific one, they were sitting waiting for him to like get on the scale, and they were holding like a massive 2-liter Sparberry, for him making weight. And like I mean, I just looked at it. I'm like, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that's a fucking bad idea. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna dehydrate yourself to get on the scale to smash a pile of sugar in your face. Like, it just doesn't seem like the right idea. You know what I mean? But most guys don't even know any better. They just like, cool. Once we've made weight, then it's a free for all. I'm gonna go slam some dirty bird at KFC.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. Like, I've been shocked. Like, from when I started helping guys with cuts, I was pretty much shocked at what guys were doing. They would be dehydrated from the Monday already. They've already started doing saunas on the Monday and running on a treadmill in a sweatsuit because they're like, I have to bring my weight down. Now they're dehydrated for a week before they fight. How's that guy going to put on a good performance? Paired with the fact that they may have one rehydrate or an Energade after the weigh-in, and then they're smashing a pizza for dinner at Carnival City. Lekker.
Yeah.
But guys need to do their homework. They need to treat it more
100%.
professionally, and they need to approach the right people who know how to do it. So,
100%. Cool. Scotty, I think we've covered some massive ground there, man. That's seriously informative. I'm sure people appreciate also the insights on the weight cut and what's really going on there. Just out of interest, do you offer, like, let's say, a weight cut and hydration service for fighters maybe that are listening, they're interested?
Yeah, for sure. I'm always keen to help whoever's willing to learn and do things the right way. I mean, if anyone wants to do weight cuts using my way, I'm available. If people want to do strength and conditioning, we're at the yard. We're ready and willing to help. And, we just want to, I want to play a little role in trying to help elevate South African MMA. The more guys we can get on that international level, the better. It's cool to see how we've progressed.
Yeah,
and,
100%.
The little way we can help, we'd love to be involved.
100%. And I think there's a 50 odd minutes of CV on how much you know on the case we're talking about, so people can listen and make their decision from there. So I'd encourage any fighter listening, man. It's such an important part, and I think you're doing yourself injustice if you're not doing it correctly, like using guys like yourself who really know what's going on. I think the levels are getting higher and higher, and you've got to kind of make sure that every aspect is taken care of. Your strength and conditioning, your weight cuts managed properly. And I don't know if there's enough guys doing it, man, and doing it properly is the big one. You know what I mean? There's like two bigger gyms that seem to manage things properly, and guys seek out the right information, and the rest are kind of like floating in between somewhere else. That's why I ask, if you offer such a service. I know there are guys that'll be like, manage your weight cut just as like maybe even just a once-off thing whenever you fight.
And we directly at that, we'll help any guys, as long as they're willing to
do the right thing.
To do it and follow the advice. And we'll help any fighters who are willing or who are in need, who want to do it. Yeah.
Cool, Scotty, man. Thanks very much for your time and for the information, man. Really appreciate it, and all the best, and we'll catch you soon.
Pleasure, bud. Good being on.
Cool, man. Ciao.
Peace.